Hey everybody, how's it going? Steve here with another batch of Switch 2 news updates. Today we've got what happens when you lose your Switch 2 JoyCon, Red Dead Redemption 2 coming to Nintendo's latest handheld, as well as an update on two separate topics from Nintendo themselves. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The first update comes from the Nintendo Today app, where they've posted a new video showcasing what happens when you lose your Switch 2 JoyCon. Let's go ahead and take a look. So this isn't a huge change from how things work on the Switch 1 now. You're actually able to look for lost Joy-Con and controllers by making them vibrate. It basically turns the rumble motor up to full blast, which if you've ever played any third-party game that uses rumble, you know just makes the controller pretty dang noisy. However, it appears that Nintendo has built in some additional functionality into the Switch 2 Joy-Con at least. There's no Pro controller shown in this video that lets it also emit a high-pitched sound, like you can hear a beep coming from it. In almost unnerving way, it sounds like a stock bomb sound effect, but this essentially gives us ample opportunity to find our missing Joy-Con. They show it kind of hidden behind a couch cushion, and as a parent, I can tell you that this is basically how I find lost Joy-Con most of the time. My kids take theirs off because they prefer to play with those over the Pro controller, and then summarily shove them into the couch cushions where I find them days, weeks, or even months later. This will help, especially considering that Nintendo only has two colors of Joy-Con available at launch. Of course, I mean, you know, the left blue and the right red, not like different ones. But with multiple members of my family picking up a Switch 2 at launch, this will at least help us ID which ones belong to which console rather than, you know, losing them entirely. I have a suspicion my kids will argue over whose Joy-Con is whose when they get theirs. But yeah, it's not a huge update, but something interesting nonetheless. Let's go ahead and jump into probably the biggest story of the day right in the middle of this update, and that is that Red Dead Redemption 2 is very likely coming to the Switch 2, and sooner than you might think. This story comes from Game Reactor, where they mentioned that they have heard from sources close to Rockstar that Red Dead Redemption 2 is coming to the Switch 2 later this year. Here's a direct quote from the story from Game Reactor. What's more, Red Dead Redemption 2 for Switch 2 wouldn't be coming alone or as a one-off move, but it's possible that it could be coming at the same time or somewhat later as an update to the game for current-gen hardware, one of the so-called next-gen upgrade patch that brings the graphics and performance of Red Dead Redemption 2 up to date for PS5 and Xbox Series X/S. They mention in the article that plans change and that maybe this is a game that is no longer going to come out, but they also mentioned that another website known as Nintenduo has heard and corroborated the same information. I have no reason to believe that Red Dead 2 wouldn't be coming to the Switch 2. Rockstar has a history of supporting Nintendo, especially in recent times, but even as far back as GTA Chinatown Wars on the DS, along with a whole other host of games that they've brought. It's worth mentioning that LA Noire came to the Switch 1 very early in its life, so it would make sense for Rockstar to further test the waters here. They also released the GTA trilogy on Switch 1, so I don't think that this is really something that is super surprising to me. Rockstar is going to want to continue to support the Switch in the ways that they can. It seems that they always bring games that are a bit older. We got Red Dead 1 on the Switch 1 in I think 2023. So I'm not really shocked here. This is not new or surprising information to me, at least. But Red Dead 2 makes sense. The Switch 2 is getting a lot of PS4 games, and so I think that this is just a natural progression of that. I don't think we're going to see anything crazy in terms of like next-gen lighting or visual techniques. I suspect that Rockstar will probably play it safe with Red Dead 2, considering how big of a game it is and how hard it would be to QA. I think they're going to really just focus on bringing the core experience that we had several years ago onto the Switch 2. And have it as performant as it was on those platforms. Red Dead 2 is a gorgeous game. Visually, it's very stunning. It's not my favorite game, but it is lauded as one of the best games of all time, so I'm probably in the wrong on this one, but I'm excited to see it. This is another game that will prove what the Switch 2 is capable of, and if they build in support for VRR or HDR on the built-in display, then that'll make the game look and run even better than it did before. But speaking of VRR specifically, well, the news is not all good there, because we finally have confirmation from Nintendo that VRR will not be supported in docked mode at launch. Nintendo Life was able to get a comment from Nintendo specifically about this, and here's how it reads. Nintendo Switch 2 supports VRR in handheld mode only. The incorrect information was initially published on the Nintendo Switch 2 website, and we apologize for the error. Nintendo Life further pressed on Nintendo to get information about whether or not this would be coming, and Nintendo didn't deny it, simply opting to say, "We have nothing to announce on this topic." And believe it or not, that's more optimistic than you may think. While it sounds extremely negative if you're not well versed in PR speak, this is basically Nintendo saying, we're not ruling it out, but we're also not saying anything about our plans to do it. Basically saying we don't want to talk about this right now. VRR, or variable refresh rate, is a technology that syncs the refresh rate of the connected display to the output of that specific game. So basically, if your game is running at 40 FPS, your monitor will update to 40 Hertz. If your game is running at 55, it'll update to 55. This gives a smoother appearance to games, because if you're running at a 60 FPS refresh rate or a 60 Hertz refresh rate, and your game is running at 45 FPS, you're going to notice some stutter. Whereas with variable refresh rate, it smooths out that stutter, makes the game look and feel a lot smoother. Some people may still notice differences. Everybody's more sensitive than others. Some people can't even tell the difference between 30, 60, and certainly 120 FPS. I tend to be very sensitive to these changes in the frame rate in my games. So I welcome VRR as an option. I'm a little sad that it's not here at launch, but it's worth noting that it also wasn't there at launch for the PlayStation 5. Sony added it within the first year of the console's life, and then games got updated to include support. I don't think games will necessarily need updates to support VRR here, because the Switch 2's built-in display does support VRR, and certain games will likely have it. In fact, I suspect Cyberpunk will utilize variable refresh rate in order to keep the gameplay looking smooth in handheld mode when the CPU and GPU clocks are lowered to preserve battery life. So I don't think this is the death knell for VRR in docked mode. We already know that the Switch 2 supports docked mode firmware updates, or firmware updates to the dock itself, and the chipset in the dock certainly includes support at a hardware level for VRR. Nintendo would just need to basically turn it on. Now, I don't know the specifics about why they're not turning it on at this time. Maybe it's just that games need further optimization to work well in VRR. I'm certainly not a game developer, and I know that game development is hard, and hardware development is also hard. So I'm willing to give Nintendo time to sort this out and do it the right way, rather than have a buggy implementation that maybe doesn't work right. So let's just give them some time. They're just getting the console out the door. I'm okay with this for now, because I don't think I ever expected games on Switch 2 to keep pace with my PS5. But it isn't all bad news for Nintendo, because while Nintendo Life was able to chat with a representative from the company, they also got a encouraging comment about the future of Switch 2 physical releases. They were specifically asking Nintendo about whether they would use game key cards for any of their first-party titles. This is a hot button topic with the community right now. There's a lot of division around whether game key cards are a good or a bad thing. I've talked about where I lay on this. I think they're a good thing when compared to the original code in a box, which apparently is still a thing for some games. Every day it gets a little bit more confusing out here, but Switch 2 game key cards will not be used for first-party Nintendo games, and I'm going to be honest, this one I'm very happy about. I don't like the idea of having a download-only Nintendo game. Of course, Welcome Tour is download-only, but I mean, in terms of something that I would have to connect to a server to get and have physically on my shelf. With first-party Nintendo games, those are evergreen titles for me that I want to play 20, 30 years down the line from now. So I'm happy with this. The specific comment from Nintendo reads as follows: "We currently have no plans to use game key cards for Nintendo-developed titles." And that is pretty strong. We just talked about PR speak in the last story. This is them saying, nothing we have coming out now or in the future is going to use game key cards. This is about as certain as you can get without completely ruling out the possibility. I mean, Nintendo could maybe do a game key card somewhere down the line, but they're basically saying everything they have in the pipeline now is using straight up normal physical cards. Either that or it's a download only title like Welcome Tour. So I think this is pretty solidly black and white. Nintendo's going to put their games on their physical media for the Switch 2. I wouldn't have expected anything less. I was never worried that Nintendo themselves were going to offer game key cards as a solution for their first party titles. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially, you know, there are parents out there who might buy a game on a road trip for their kid and be like, here you go, I got you this to keep you chilled out while I drive for 9-10 hours. And the last thing you want is that kid telling you they have to download that game. So I think this makes a whole lot of sense. I'm happy to hear it, but I also am not even in the slightest bit surprised. So that is our roundup for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. What was your favorite story? Are you sad about VRR? Are you happy that Nintendo's not using game key cards? Are you now waiting for Red Dead Redemption 2 to come to Switch? Are you just excited to find some JoyCon in your couch? Let me know. Thanks again for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to GVG for all things Nintendo Switch 2. Hit that notification bell to be the first to know every time a video goes up. And if you'd like to support us, head over to patreon.com/gvgaming to find out how. Again, I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.